I hadn't been back to Willow Creek in almost a year. Work kept me busy in Chicago, long hours, late nights. But when Frank, my dad, called 2 weeks ago, his voice sounded almost warm. He thanked me for sorting out that mess with his taxes, not in a rushed, distracted way, but a clean, "thanks, son," that lingered just long enough for me to hear it. It got to me. So when Father's Day rolled around, I told myself I'd show up like it mattered, like I mattered. I didn't just grab a gift card on the way, I went all in. I found a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle bourbon, hard to get unless you know someone, and I knew he loved it back when I was a kid, and we'd sit on the porch, him with a tumbler, me with root beer in a plastic cup. I picked out a pair of Wilson A2000 leather gloves, the kind we'd never been able to afford when I played Little League. And then, the hardest thing, I wrote him a letter. Not a text, not a Hallmark card with a generic "thanks for everything." A real letter, on thick stationery, sealed in a deep navy envelope. I told him I remembered the good years, that I appreciated what he'd done, that I still loved him even when it hurt. I signed it with the fountain pen my grandfather left me. The drive from Chicago to Michigan's Lake Country is 4 hours if traffic behaves. The closer I got, the more I let myself imagine what it would be like. Frank smiling when he saw me, clapping me on the shoulder, maybe even introducing me to the neighbors as his son. When I pulled into their driveway, the smell of barbecue and fresh-cut grass hit me. The lake glimmered behind the house, dotted with boats. Linda, my dad's wife, was in the yard arranging trays of ribs and corn on the cob. Ryan, her 21-year-old son, was tossing a football with some cousins. Frank was at the grill, wearing a King of the Q apron. "Ethan," he said when I walked up, like he'd just remembered I was coming. No hug, just a nod. I handed him the bourbon, the gloves. He glanced at the bottle like it was a receipt. "Nice," he said, then passed it to Linda without comment. I looked for a seat. Every chair around the patio table was taken. Ryan was in the spot next to Frank, leaning in, talking about his economics professor and stock market plays. I found a folding chair in the corner, set my gifts on the side table. No one asked me about work. No one even asked if I wanted a beer. I sat there, smiling when appropriate, telling myself it didn't matter, that I wasn't here for the attention, that maybe after the food, I'd hand Frank the letter, and maybe that would shift something, maybe. But when Ryan cracked a joke, something about Ethan only showing up when he smells free food, Linda laughed, and Frank didn't say a word to defend me. It stung. I kept my voice light. Well, I didn't come empty-handed. Ryan smirked. "What'd you get him, a coupon?" "Nope," I said, pulling the navy envelope from my jacket pocket. "This year it's in writing." I set it down beside Frank's plate, the dark blue standing out against the white tablecloth. No one asked what was in it. No one even picked it up. Conversation flowed right past me like I wasn't there. I poured myself a glass of lemonade and tried to ignore the tightness in my chest. Maybe I'd been stupid to expect anything else. When I was little, it was just me and Frank in a one-bedroom walk-up off Maple Street. I called him Dad then, not Frank. He worked double shifts at a parts warehouse and still found a way to make Saturday mornings feel like a holiday. Cartoons, pancakes, plastic dinosaurs marching through a syrup swamp. He taught me to oil my first glove on the fire escape and let me stay up late to listen to Tigers games on the radio. He was tired, broke, and still present. I wore that presence like a warm jacket. The year I turned 12, everything tilted. Dad met Linda at the Willow Creek 4th of July festival, under a sky loud with fireworks that felt too big for our small town. She smiled at him like she already knew the ending. A month later, there were hair ties in the bathroom and fancy mustard in the fridge. She moved in quietly, like a fog, and the apartment learned a new arrangement without asking me. A year after that, Ryan arrived. Tiny fist, big lungs, a future everyone could see. I remember Dad crying in the hospital, his voice cracked with relief. I held Ryan and thought I was holding a promise. I didn't know the promise wasn't for me. Life sorted itself into new shapes. Our living room became a nursery. The photos on the wall multiplied, except in most of them, I was somewhere out of frame. Dad's hand, once on my shoulder, now held a diaper bag. When Linda introduced us to neighbors, she said, "This is Ethan," with a friendly smile that somehow put a polite fence around me. Not my son, not our son, just Ethan. I tried not to keep a ledger, but the pages added up. The time Dad missed my band concert because Ryan had a fever. The Saturday he forgot our batting cages ritual because Linda's parents were visiting. My 13th birthday, when I blew out candles alone at the kitchen table while they napped after a long night. None of it was cruel. That's what made it harder to fight. It was kindness, reallocated. Attention, redistributed. love, written in a smaller font. By the time I hit high school, I'd learned the art of taking up less space. I stopped asking for rides. I learned to cook, sort laundry, manage my homework without reminders. If Dad noticed, he called it independence. Linda called it maturity. I called it weather. It rained, and I learned to be dry. When Dad and Linda bought the lake house, the walls shifted again. The photos in the hallway told a story that didn't need me to be complete. Ryan on a tricycle, Ryan in a Halloween costume, Ryan catching his first fish with Dad's arms around him. I did what I'd always done, showed up. Holidays, birthdays, random Sundays. I brought gifts with meaning, a signed baseball for Dad's office, a set of chef's knives for Linda after she got into cooking, a laptop sleeve for Ryan when he started community college. I never heard "you shouldn't have." Mostly I heard thanks over a shoulder as someone walked away. In college I worked 2 jobs, graduated without fanfare, then moved to Chicago for a junior analyst role. When the firm promoted me, I called Dad first. He didn't pick up. He texted the next day, "Proud of you, kid," and then asked if I knew anyone hiring with flexible hours. Ryan was thinking about transferring to a university in Ann Arbor. Money would be tight. I said I'd see what I could do. I always could. I found Ryan a paid internship through a client who trusted me. I coached him through the interview, reworked his resume, even took him shopping for 2 shirts that fit. He got the gig. Dad said I had a knack for helping. I pretended that sounded the same as "I'm grateful." Every so often, though, something would flicker. A call from Dad just to check in. A text with an old photo of the 2 of us, my kid self grinning in a too big baseball cap. It kept me hooked, the way a slot machine keeps you, just enough light to make you think the next pull could change everything. So yes, when Father's Day came and Dad sounded warmer on the phone, I let myself remember the porches and the radio and the root beer. I told myself this time could be different. Not perfect, not even close, just softer. I showed up with gifts that meant something because I still wanted to mean something. When I set that navy envelope beside Dad's plate and no one looked up, I felt 12 again, standing in the doorway of a nursery that used to be our living room, understanding without anyone saying it. The family had rearranged, and I'd become furniture. Useful, quiet, movable, almost invisible. But almost isn't nothing, almost keeps records, almost waits, almost notices the moment something finally breaks. That moment was coming. I could feel it, like thunder in the bones before the storm. The deck boards were warm under my shoes, sun-baked and smooth from years of summers I wasn't really in. Ryan's friends sprawled across Adirondack chairs, laughing too loud about a professor who definitely trades options in the middle of class. Linda floated around with a pitcher of sweet tea like the mayor of a small, well-funded town. Dad tended the grill with the confidence of a man who believes heat obeys him. I kept finding small ways to be helpful, which is what people like me do when we don't know where to stand. I carried out more ice. I refolded a stack of napkins. I listened. When Ryan made another joke at my expense, Ethan's the cousin who shows up once a quarter with a PowerPoint, there were chuckles. Dad smirked, not unkindly. The smirk landed like a thumb pressing down. I reminded myself I wasn't here to be liked. I was here to be honest. So I waited for a lull and said, "Hey, Dad, there's something I wrote." I tapped the navy envelope, let my voice stay light. "Just wanted you to have it." Linda glanced down, eyes skimming the color like decor. "How thoughtful," she said, already turning to ask if the coleslaw needed more pepper. Dad didn't touch it. I told myself maybe he'd open it later, alone. Maybe that would be better. The food was good. It always is. That's part of the trap. Generosity in the places that show up on Instagram. Ribs that slid off the bone, corn that snapped when you bit it, pie with a crust Linda bragged about like a second child. I ate, smiled, made small talk about weather patterns and airfare prices. I laughed when laughter was required. After the plates were scraped into stacks, I did what I do. I gathered dishes, balanced them like a busboy, and asked where the trash went. "Garage," Linda said, pointing with a manicure. "We keep the big bags by the tool bench." The garage door was half open, afternoon light cutting a diagonal across the concrete. It smelled like gasoline, cut grass, and the hot iron of summer. I set my plate on top of a black contractor bag, reached to tie it tighter, and saw a flash of navy. The envelope. At first, my brain tried to make it something else. Maybe Linda staged gifts in the garage for later. Maybe Dad tucked it here to open in private. Then my eyes tracked the rest. The bourbon box tilted against a stack of paint cans. The Wilson gloves pinched under a bag of aluminum cans. A bouquet of ribs, bones, and paper towels resting on the envelope like a paperweight. The navy was smudged with sauce. The seal was unbroken. Something very quiet inside me stood up. Not anger, not yet. More like a thermostat snapping to a new setting. I stared at my own handwriting, for Dad, in careful black ink. I thought about 12-year-old me saving allowance for Father's Day ties, about 22-year-old me calling from a Greyhound station to say I'd made it to Chicago, about 32-year-old me blocking time on my calendar to find that bourbon. I reached in and lifted the envelope free. A wet ring had soaked into the corner. I wiped it gently with the inside of my shirt like it was a wound. Then I saw the gloves, still stiff, still smelling like leather and memory, and the bottle, heavy with other people's special occasions. I pulled them out too. For a second I stood there, arms full of what I thought was care, realizing that to them it was just clutter with better packaging. I didn't rehearse a speech. I didn't blow up the deck with a scene. I slid the bourbon and gloves into the reusable bag I'd brought for leftovers, tucked the envelope on top, and walked to my car. The afternoon felt too bright, like a stage light that makes colors look fake. I sat behind the wheel with the engine off and placed the envelope on the passenger seat. It looked small there, a berthing card for a ship that had already sailed. I could have gone back in. I could have asked Dad to explain, made him choose in front of everyone. Instead, I stared at the envelope until the salt ring dried to a faint watermark. The longer I looked, the less room there was for excuses. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a habit with better PR. I turned the key and drove away slowly, like leaving a crime scene that wasn't technically a crime. No door slam, no text, just the gentle violence of exit. As the lake house shrank in the rear view, I thought of all the times I'd walked toward that door hoping to be seen, and all the times I'd left with the same blank space where a welcome should be. My chest stopped trying to be brave. It settled. Halfway back to Chicago, I rolled the windows down and let the wind take the smell of smoke out of my clothes. The envelope sat perfect and unopened beside me. I pictured putting it in the trash myself, carrying the symbolism to its logical end. But I couldn't. Not because of Dad, because of me. That letter wasn't theirs to discard. When I got home, I laid everything on the kitchen counter. Bourbon standing like a witness, gloves like a folded prayer, letter like a verdict. I stared until the lines of my handwriting steadied. Then I flipped on the light above the sink, pulled out my laptop, and did something I'd never done in 32 years. I chose me. The glow of my laptop felt surgical in the dark kitchen. The house across the alley was a grid of sleeping rectangles. Mine was the lone aquarium light in a quiet block. I opened my email, typed slowly, and read each line out loud to hear how it landed. Subject: Father's Day. Body: hey, just a heads up. Inside that Navy envelope I tucked a bank draft for $2,000 toward Ryan's fall tuition. Figured you'd know what to do with it. Hope it didn't get lost in the shuffle. I read it once more and took inventory of myself. No tremor, no glee. This wasn't revenge. This was a mirror held still. I hit send. Then I got practical. Years of being useful had left me with an intimate map of their finances, who got paid when, which autopays lived on which cards. I logged into the utility accounts I'd quietly covered for months when Dad's self-employed income dipped. I scheduled final payments and removed my card. Not a threat, a boundary. I opened the scholarship portal where I'd promised to bridge Ryan's tuition gap if fall aid came in late. The transfer was scheduled for the 15th. I canceled it and forwarded the confirmation to myself. A simple line of text: transaction canceled. I felt the floor tilt an inch and then stabilize. Next, the network. Frank's work lived on referrals, reputation, and the illusion of seamless connection. He had some talent, sure, but doors open easier when someone says your name before you knock. I pulled 3 contacts I'd introduced him to, solid people who trusted my word. I wrote each a short note. Heads up, please don't associate my name with Frank's future projects. Nothing dramatic, just a personal boundary. Hope you understand. No details, no gossip. I didn't need to plant a story. I just needed to withdraw my part in his. When the emails left my outbox, the kitchen felt colder. I poured hot water over a tea bag out of habit, let it steep into bitterness, then forgot to drink it. The bourbon on the counter watched me, glassy and patient. The gloves looked like some museum display about American boyhood. The letter lay there like a sleeping animal. I didn't touch it. At 7:52 a.m., my phone vibrated. Linda, missed call. Then a text. Hey, quick question. What did you mean about a bank draft? Was it in the letter? Another call. Then Dad. Another text. Ethan, is this a joke? We can't find anything. 10 minutes later, Ryan. Dude, if this is real, you need to answer. I brushed my teeth. I showered. I let the phone become a frog in another room, croaking for attention. The messages stacked. By 8:45, I had a neat little chorus. Linda in a panic, Dad toggling between irritation and urgency, Ryan lacing concern with accusation. I put the phone in a drawer, a boundary with a hinge. I worked from home that morning, ran scenarios for a client, built a deck, scheduled a check-in. Every 20 minutes, I opened the drawer and watched new texts crawl onto the glass. How much? Are you sure? Please call me. This is serious, Ethan. Do you still have the envelope? Was it navy or black? Did you mean to give it to him? Please respond. At noon, Dad's tone changed. This is childish. At 12:06, are you lying? The 12:06 text buzzed twice like it wanted out. I didn't respond. I was not their evidence clerk. I was not their lost and found. In the afternoon, I took the letter to the window and held it against the light. The paper glowed translucent, the words underneath soft like bones beneath skin. I could have opened it then, reread what I'd tried to say to a man who didn't want to hear it. But the letter wasn't for me to read anymore. It was proof of something I didn't need to prove, to anyone else or to myself. The calls kept coming. At 3:17 p.m., a voicemail from Linda, voice tight. Ethan, I'm sure this is a misunderstanding. If there was money, we'll make it right. Please, can you just confirm? At 3:24, Ryan, you're messing with Mom's head. That's not cool. I sat at my table and let the words wash past like traffic on a road I'd finally moved away from. Around 5, I sent one more email, to myself. Subject, record. I wrote down exactly what had happened, the timeline, the texts, the calls, not because I expected a lawsuit, because that's what you do when you've lived years gaslit by niceness. You document. You keep a map of reality in your own handwriting. By evening, the chorus had thinned into a steady hum. I ate leftovers. I watered the fern I keep killing. I put the bourbon and gloves in a cabinet and closed the door. The letter stayed on the counter, a small navy square of gravity I orbited without touching. When my phone buzzed again at 9:02, Dad, then Linda, then Ryan, I turned it face down and let the night do what night does best, make the next morning inevitable. I slept briefly. It wasn't peace. It was a maintenance window. When I woke at 2:11 a.m., the city was a soundless machine, blinking lights on a horizon that didn't need me. I padded into the kitchen, stood over the letter, and finally knew what had changed. Not them, me. Silence speaks a language people who depend on noise don't understand. By midweek, my non-answers translated into outcomes they could hear. One referral partner emailed Frank to pause a project pending internal shifts. Another client asked to handle invoices directly. Ryan's bursar office sent a notice, balance due, enrollment on hold, no fireworks, just flowers that never got watered. On Thursday, my receptionist pinged me. There's a man downstairs asking for you, says it's urgent. I knew before she said his name. Frank stood in the lobby, hands on hips, wearing the same expression he used to give the TV when the Lions blew a lead. He didn't say hello. He said, "We need to talk." We walked out to Main Street, where lunch crowds made a little river around us. He moved like a man who expects gravity to be on his side. "You think this is funny?" he started. "That stunt with the email? You humiliated your family, you humiliated me." I considered the word, humiliated, a big word for a man who hadn't touched an envelope because it wasn't wrapped in a story that centered him. I kept my voice even. I sent a heads up about something that would have mattered if you'd cared to look. He stepped closer. "You're punishing Ryan for something he didn't do. His education was supposed to be a team effort," I said. My part was contingent on basic respect, not even love, just not putting my gift in a trash bag before dessert. He flinched, tiny, but I saw it. I found the bourbon by the paint cans, I said. Gloves under recycling, the letter with rib juice on it. I pointed at an imaginary watermark on the air between us. Seal, unbroken. His jaw worked. He reached for authority. "I provided for you. I nodded. "And I provided for you. Utility bills, bridging months when gigs fell through, coaching Ryan's job search, referrals, a dozen doorways. You called it support when I did it. You call it obligation when you do. Interesting math." He stared at me like I'd switched languages mid-sentence. "If you had a problem, you should have said something." "I did," I said. "I said it by showing up, by writing a letter, by putting the envelope next to your plate at your table, where your son sits, and saying I want a relationship with you that doesn't require me to be invisible." I smiled, not kindly. "You threw the letter away." Traffic hissed wet on asphalt even though the sky was clear. That's how this felt, like rain you couldn't see soaking through. For a second, something hurt crossed his face and then went stiff. "You're making this bigger than it is," he said. "You're acting like a child." I thought about 12-year-old me, learning to pack himself into smaller boxes to fit other people's rooms. I thought about 32-year-old me, opening my laptop like a door. "I'm acting like an adult," I said. "I'm stating a boundary and enforcing it. You taught me to do that once, back when you told me no one gets to treat me like less than." "That's not what this is," he snapped. "It's exactly what this is," I said. "And before you say I'm punishing Ryan, let's be clear. Choices have ripples. If I'm a checkbook and a Rolodex to you, then closing both is not cruelty, it's clarity." For a long second, all I heard was the city, a bus kneeling, a crosswalk counting down, a bike chain clicking. Frank's shoulders dropped an inch. He looked tired in a way I recognized, the result of years of pretending your version of the story is the only one that exists. "What do you want?" he asked finally, like there might be a price he could pay. "I wanted you to read the letter," I said. "I wanted you to choose me when choosing me wasn't convenient. Barring that, I want peace." He opened his mouth, then closed it. The wind picked up, flipped his collar. He looked like a man about to say, "I'm sorry," and then remembered who he was in his own head. "We raised you," he said instead. "Don't forget that." "I won't," I said. "I won't forget anything." I left him on the sidewalk, not dramatic, just done. Back upstairs, I stood at the window and watched him cross the street like a man walking home after a game he thinks he should have won. That night, Ryan posted a vague story about people who bail when family needs them. A few mutuals liked it. One cousin texted to ask if I was okay. I said, "I'm good. It wasn't a lie, not in the new math." My phone rang once more the next day. A group call. Dad, Linda, Ryan, awkward harmonies. I let it roll to voicemail. "We just want to talk," Linda said, sweet like a glaze. "You made your point. Can we reset?" No one said we were wrong. No one said we're sorry. Reset is a button for people who don't want to admit they kicked the plug out of the wall. I blocked their numbers that afternoon. My hand didn't shake. When the quiet arrived, it didn't feel empty. It felt like a room that finally belonged to me. The first weekend without their names buzzing my pocket, I slept in and woke up to a new kind of silence, the kind that doesn't ask you to prove anything. I made coffee the way I like it, too strong, and opened the windows to let in June. Chicago sounded alive and uninterested in my family's habits, a relief and a dare. I started small. I bought a secondhand dining table, sanded it on my balcony, and invited a few friends over for pot roast and card games. We ate too much and argued about dumb movies and passed dishes without performance. When somebody said, "Tell me about your week," they meant it. I told them about a spreadsheet that finally balanced and a fern that finally looked less suicidal. I did not tell them about bourbon or gloves or envelopes, not because I was hiding, because that story had stopped being the most interesting thing about me. Work got better. The parts of my brain that had been leased to their emergencies returned with their suitcases. I noticed I made cleaner decisions when I wasn't simulating 5 people's reactions before sending an email. I took a run by the lake and let the wind shove against my chest like a friend roughhousing. I slept a full night for the first time in months and dreamed about nothing particular, which felt like a luxury. 3 weeks in, an unknown number texted, "Saw you moved. Hope you're well. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Linda." No apology, no admission, just a door propped open with a polite foot. I set the phone down and let the message exist without me. On a Sunday evening in late August, I opened the cabinet where I'd stashed the lake house artifacts. I poured a finger of the bourbon into a glass, not a toast, not a funeral. I slipped the Wilson gloves on and flexed the leather until it softened to my grip. Then I took the navy envelope out and set it on the table I'd made my own. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside. Sentences that used to be a bridge to a relationship that didn't want to cross back. Instead, I wrote a new letter on a fresh sheet of the same thick paper, not to Frank, to me. I wrote about 12-year-old Ethan, and 22 and 32. I wrote about the difference between being needed and being loved, about the obligation dressed up as gratitude that had kept me fetching chairs at other people's tables. I wrote a sentence I wish someone had given me earlier. "You don't have to be quieter to belong." I signed it with my grandfather's pen and sealed it without an address. Later, on the balcony, the city flaring like constellations pretending to be streetlights, I answered the question that had haunted me since the garage. Was I harsh? Maybe. Boundaries feel like knives to people who prefer butter. But harsh isn't the same as cruel. Cruelty wants you to hurt so I can feel better. Boundaries want you to understand so we can both stop bleeding. If I'd chosen a different moment, a different tone, a different tactic, Would anything have changed? Maybe for a week? Maybe until the next barbecue, the next photo wall, the next small erasure with a smile. In the end, what changed wasn't the setting. It was the story I told about myself inside it. Sometimes I take the train up to a neighborhood I don't know well and walk until I find a park that doesn't feel like it belongs to anyone. Kids cut through the air with their bikes. A dad teaches a daughter to throw, and the glove makes that sweet pop. I sit on a bench and let the sound land in my chest like a memory that's forgiven itself. In September, a partner at the firm stopped by my desk and said there was a promotion opening. "You lead clean," she said. "People follow that." I said thank you and meant it. When the email went out, I didn't reach for my phone. There was no one left to impress who would have preferred my silence. I still think about the lake house sometimes, not with longing, with accuracy. A place can be beautiful and still not be home. A family can be yours and still not be safe. Love can exist and still not be enough when it's rationed. The bourbon bottle is half full now, which is to say half gone, which is to say half left. The gloves live by the door. The navy envelope sits in a drawer beside the new one I wrote. Some nights I imagine them as bookends on a shelf, a story I tried to give and a story I finally kept. If you asked me what I'd tell someone standing in a garage holding their best intentions, I'd say, don't throw them away just because somebody else did. Put them back in your own hands. Walk to your own car. Drive toward the life that looks at you and says, you don't have to be smaller here. The lake at Willow Creek is very still on windless days. That used to scare me. It felt like nothing happening. Now I know stillness can be a boundary too, a surface that holds. When the breeze does come, it makes ripples that go all the way across, gentle and relentless, reaching shores that didn't even know they were waiting.